Aloha, and welcome to the monthly public presentation of the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. Since 1990, the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii has been following our mission of promoting human health, animal rights, and protection of the environment by means of vegetarian education, as we've grown to become one of the largest all-volunteer, nonprofit vegetarian societies in the nation. It's now time to introduce our special guest. We're happy to have with us tonight Hope Bohanec. Hope Bohanec has been active in animal protection and environmental activism for over 25 years and published the book, The Ultimate Betrayal, Is There Happy Meat? A nationally recognized leader and speaker in the animal protection movement, she serves as projects manager for United Poultry Concerns. Hope is also the executive director of Compassionate Living, a Sonoma County, California-based vegan advocacy organization, as well as the primary organizer for UPC's annual Conscious Eating Conference at UC Berkeley, the Sonoma County Veg Fest, and the Berkeley Earth Day. Her presentation tonight is entitled The Humane Hoax. Please join me in welcoming Hope Bohanec.
Wow, thank you all so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here and pleasure to be able to come to Hawaii to do this. How amazing. I personally have been vegan for 28 years and, oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, back then you had to really want it, let me tell you. No vegan brownies back then. Doing this work for all this time, I've been environmental activist and an animal rights activist for about 25 years. It's been kind of the same information, the same thing going on, except for about like 10 years ago or so, things started changing and shifting. And you were hearing things like, oh, but I get, my eggs are cage-free, and my meat's organic. You know, I get my meat at Whole Foods, so it's okay. And so I thought this was an interesting shift and really wanted to look deeply into these labels and what was going on. So I did some extensive research, and I live personally in Sonoma County, California, which is about an hour north of San Francisco. There is a lot of this going on up there, small scale animal agriculture with alternative labeling. I was able to do some real intensive on-site research and interviews. You know, I wrote the book because I really wanted to expose the truth behind these labels and what was really going on, both environmentally and ethically. But before we get into the details of all that, I want to introduce a concept, speciesism. Has anyone in this room not heard of the word speciesism? A few people. Okay, good. Good, then I'm glad we're introducing it. Of course, you can kind of guess what's going on. I mean, I have the definition up here, the assumption of human superiority leading to the exploitation of animals. Like racism, like sexism, which is, you know, really grappling with in our society right now. It is a domination of one group over another. And in this case, it is a specific species, humans, dominating over all the other animals on the planet, and specific to our conversation here, the food animals that are bred and raised and killed for their meat, dairy, and eggs. I like to bring in this concept because it's not about food, it's about the animals. And I want people to remember that and know that. It's important and great to get all the nutritional information and to talk about the food, you know, that's important, but really behind it all is this concept that we are not the dominant species. We live in harmony with the other animals. Anyway, well, we can get more into that later, but I just wanted to bring this concept in so, and you can kind of think about it when we go through the details of what we're going to talk about today. When I'm talking about alternative animal product, I don't have the time in this presentation to go into the details of all this different labels. I do in the book. I break down all the different labels in the book. You kind of get the picture. We're talking about cage-free, free-range, organic, sustainable, all these labels that we're seeing now. And the reason that we're seeing them is actually really positive. For the last 30, 40 years or so, organizations like my organization, United Poultry Concerns, brave activists that have gone into these places where these animals live in misery and have filmed this to bring to people on the internet to see. We're starting to wake up. People are starting to realize that animals are, something's not quite right down on the farm, And they're questioning animal products. They're seeking alternatives. And that's a good thing. The industry is getting scared. The industry is kind of like, wow, what's going on here? And so they are really switching their marketing tactics and trying to appease people into buying their products. So they're using these, feel-good labels. But what I found, and going into the book, I thought that I was going to really be honest. I was going to be very honest about it and say, oh, well, free range is better, but going vegan's best. Or organic's better, but going vegan is best. No, that's not what I found at all. I actually found that in some instances, the conditions can be worse. It's so varied from farm to farm, but we'll get into some detail about that. But really, inherent cruelties abound in creating an animal product, and you can't wish those away with a feel-good label. Even farms that want to do better, still to make a profitable product, they have to compromise the well-being of these animals in some ways, and we'll talk about that more specifically. So I want to start with egg production, chickens. And of course, I work for United Poultry Concerns. We are a national organization that focuses entirely on chickens and turkeys, birds that are raised and bred and killed for their eggs and their meat. And they are 97% of the land animals that we breed and kill for food. So they're really just the vast majority of animals that are being raised for food. So it's really important to focus on them. We're going to talk about the hatcheries, debeaking, some crowded conditions, and also their slaughter. No egg industry, no egg farm can profitably hatch their own chicks, no matter the label, even if it's cage-free or free range, and these are the kind of labels that we're talking about here when we're talking about egg production. They just can't profitably hatch their own chicks. If they're hatching their own chicks, then it's a hobby backyard. They're not making money on it. It's not their livelihood. There's just no way they can do it. So all egg industries, no matter the size, no matter the label, they source their chicks from hatcheries. And hatcheries are these brutal places. So what is the natural way that a chick should be hatched? Someone said, yeah, well, how should a chick be hatched? Well, yeah, in a nest, right? In a nest with their mother, being carefully taken care of, warm and comforted in the nest. You know that actually a mother hen and a little chick, while they're still in the egg, they communicate, they coo and cluck to each other. It's this beautiful, beautiful, natural process of love and attention that a mother hen gives to this chick. All of this is completely denied in the egg and chicken meat industry. Never is a chick hatched in a nest. Never does a chick see her mother hen. They are hatched in hatcheries, and hatcheries are these brutal industrial places where they are hatched in metal drawers. They're immediately thrust into a world of conveyor belts and metal machinery and workers tossing them around. Over on the right, this is a sexing process where they are taking the chicks, rubbing their finger between the legs, trying to determine the sex. They toss them into either the male or female chute. The females, of course, in the egg industry will be then shipped by mail to the egg producers, no matter the label, cage-free, whatever. That's a whole other, horror that I talk about in the book. We don't have time for the shipping of the chicks. But the layers, they are not genetically bred to grow quickly enough to be profitable for meat. Okay, so they're really a waste product of the industry. It's not worth the farmer's time to raise that chicken for meat, because the broiler chickens that are raised for meat grow so quickly, so fast, they are ready for slaughter within just weeks. They're so big. But the egg layers, of course, have been genetically bred for years and years and years, or decades, to lay lots of eggs, and so they're not the same genetic strand. And they're a waste product, and they're killed by the millions. This is a typical way for the hatcheries to deal with this surplus of male chicks. They just throw them away out in the garbage. They suffocate on the weight of their brothers, die of dehydration, exposure. It's so heartbreaking. And we just had Easter, and you go into the store and see the Easter cards with a little chick, and what is the symbol of that? It's love and softness and compassion and gentleness. Yet we're killing them by the billions in the egg industry. It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. Another way that they're killed is go down these conveyor belts, dropped into large maceration machines, like a big blender that just blends them up for products like pet food and fertilizer. Very, very, very sad. And the ones that survive this process, the little females in the egg industry, and then of course the broilers, also are debeaked, and this is a very painful process. Australian Veterinary Journal states that it's absolutely very painful. There's nerve endings in the beak. A very brutal process. It can actually cause them lifelong pain, lifelong difficulty in preening themselves, eating. So I mentioned that I live in Sonoma County, California. I have gone out to a lot of these farms and gone and checked it out myself. Done a lot of interviews with people, but I wanted to see it for myself. When you go to these chicken farms, this is generally the first thing you see. Keep out, biohazard, nothing going on here. They really don't want you in there. They don't want you to know what's going on. And if you go a little deeper in, this is typically what you'll see. Rows and rows of windowless warehouses. What don't you see? Chickens. That's right. You don't see chickens. It's rare to actually see the chickens on the farm. But then if you go up and look in through a slatted walls, this is what you see. This is a typical cage-free operation. Now, we have, in this situation, gotten the birds out of the battery cages. And the battery cages are tightly confined, small cages where the birds are crammed in there, stacked on top of each other. It's really kind of been determined, rightly so, that this is one of the most brutal things in the industry, one of the saddest and cruelest things that happens to the birds. And I would agree. So the industry has responded to us and us telling them that we feel this is wrong by going cage-free. But this is typically what you'll see for a cage-free operation. Now, does this look like an ideal life for a chicken? No. No, they're still crammed in together, no windows, really just miserable life. When you walk in and you're 5 feet up, the ammonia smell is just overwhelming. The workers wear respirating masks. They're down there right in it. The waste, they don't clean these places out. They're just living in their own waste. The little birds get respiratory problems, pain and burning in their nose and their throat. It's really miserable, absolutely miserable, and so monotonous, just an absolutely monotonous life. My husband and I actually recently rescued a rooster. It was a fascinating journey doing this because I actually had never lived with a chicken before. I've been to sanctuaries and spent a lot of time with chickens on sanctuaries, but roosters are very hard to place, incredibly hard to place. And there was a situation where basically this rooster his little life was in my hands. He was going to be killed if I didn't take him at that moment. And so I ended up with a rooster in my car and a rooster in my backyard for a month. It's amazing how busy they are all day. They're busy little critters. They have such an amazing little life. I mean, dust bathing and sunbathing and looking for food and doing this and doing that. And it really was so eye-opening to compare it to something like this, something where they have just nothing, no stimulation, such a monotonous life. It really was an amazing experience. So I want to show you on this next slide how we typically raise and have for decades raised broiler chickens, the chickens that are raised for meat, both male and female. This is a typical broiler shed. Again, thousands of birds crammed into the floor, windowless warehouse, really, again, similar miserable situation. Now this is the commercial, the industrial, the regular. Okay, now let's go back to the cage-free, the organic. This could even be a free-range situation. They just have to open up a little door to the outside that's got like a 5-foot by 5-foot concrete patio that's so unappealing, no bird would want to go out there, and they can call that free-range. There's so little regulation. There's zero regulation on most of the labels. It's a rubber stamping where the farmer just fills out a form, sends it in, and no one is denied. There's no on-site inspection of the farm. No one is denied these labels. So now let's go back to the commercial, the bad, the regular, and the cage-free, the organic. Do we see any difference here? No. It is a marketing ploy, a massive lying of the public. A little bit of a warning. There's a bit of an intense slide next, but I feel like it's important for us to bear witness and know what's really going on the farm. So some farms are slaughtering the animals on site and are saying that is more humane, right? Well, let's have a look. What do we think if this is more humane? The bird is still disoriented, shoved upside down into what is called a chicken killing cone. This is the typical way that they kill the birds on the farm. The throat is slit, the blood spurts out, is drained out of the bird. It can take agonizing minutes for her to die. I have seen video of this where they are kicking, fighting for life. For agonizing minutes. They can actually still be conscious when next put into the vat of scalding hot water that they put them in to defeather them. Okay, we'll go beyond that slide. I go into so much more detail in the book, but we're going to switch gears now to dairy just to be able to fit in a lot in this presentation. In the dairy industry, the labels that we're seeing are organic, family farmed, that kind of thing. Artificial insemination, I don't have time to go into artificial insemination, but it truly is a cow's Me Too moment. I mean, it is an absolute violation of her body. I encourage you to, go on YouTube and watch the videos of artificial insemination and learn and see what it is. It's awful, horrible. This is what we want to believe over here on the left. So what we want to believe is going on these farms. We want to believe that the calf gets to stay with her mother and they get to be in the sunshine and the grass and, have this loving, beautiful exchange in the sunshine. No, this is not reality. This is what you'll see on their website, but not reality. The reality is on the right. They take these babies away right soon after birth, organic, free range, pasture raised, whatever, it doesn't matter. This is a little female, you can tell, because she's going into the calf hutches, which are like large dog houses that they have on the other side of the dairy farm, away from the mothers. She's also wet with her birth fluid, so she has been taken away very, very soon after birth. We'll talk a little more about the calf hutches. There's a lot of dairy operations going on in Sonoma County as well, and I've been looking into the dairy situation there as well. And cows are much harder to hide than chickens. Cows are a lot bigger, and they move them around from places where they stay to the milking barns. So they're typically walking them around. So you do see the cows. Because of that, instead of seeing keep out, don't come near here, biohazard signs, you see these kinds of signs. Organic, sustainable, it's all okay, everything's going great here. Real California milk, right? So this is the kind of signs that you see all over Sonoma County with the small dairy. But this is what you'll see when you start getting a little closer. Now what you're seeing here are rows and rows and rows of calf hutches. These are where they take the baby females right after birth and confine them in these dog houses, chain them up, separated from their mothers. The bond that a mother and baby calf have is really amazing. It's strong. And to separate them is psychologically absolutely traumatizing to the cows, to both the mother and baby. I had a friend who lived near a dairy. She said that the cows were one day just suddenly like crying these awful just moos of pain. She thought they were like slaughtering all the cows. She didn't know what was going on. So she went to the farm to see what the ruckus was, why they were making all this noise. And the farmer said, "Oh yeah, we took the babies away today." So sad. It's horrible. So you get up closer, you can see frightened, sad, and alone. Muck and manure. Again, these are all pictures that I've taken around in Sonoma County dairies. This is another little calf over there on the right, just in a little mud puddle. It was brand new, little baby. You also see injured animals. This mama on the right there, her back leg was so swollen. She could barely walk on it. She was just limping on this back leg trying to get across the paddock. I ended up calling animal control, and it was this whole thing, but really, really sad. And again, this was an organic dairy. So something I want to talk about with organic dairy that I think is really important, and so important, I actually just yesterday here in Honolulu talked to someone who said, he asked me when I was here, so we started getting into this conversation, and he said something to the effect of, he said, "Oh, well, cows have it so much better now. The dairy's getting it so much better now because it's organic and they're phasing out the antibiotics and it's all getting better." And I just, it was like facepalm. So frustrating because actually, remember back when I was talking about how sometimes it's even worse? Well, organic dairy is one of those instances. The reason is in intensive dairy confinement and operation, cows often get mastitis, and mastitis is an infection of the udder where the udder can swell, there can be open wounds, it can be very painful for them to be milked. Mastitis is a really horrible infection that they get. And in the dairy industry, it's very typical for them to give the cows antibiotics, medications to clear up the mastitis. In organic dairy, they would have to take her out of production. They couldn't sell her milk if they gave this mama cow that is infected with mastitis the antibiotics to clear up the infection. So guess what? They don't. I had large animal vets that worked in the dairy industry confide in me, and they wouldn't let me quote them in the book, so that's why I like to tell it in the presentations. But they confided in me that they saw cows in the worst stages of mastitis, in the worst pain from mastitis on organic dairies because they would not give them the medications to clear up the infections. So these labels mean nothing, and it can even be worse. So in alternative meat production, we see a lot of the same things that we're seeing in regular or typical or commercial meat production. There's still debeaking, tail docking and cutting, ear notching, tooth filing, castration, dehorning, transportation in all extremes of weather, freezing cold, sometimes no food or water for up to 3 days in transportation, still overcrowded conditions. I don't have time to get into a lot of detail, but this kind of sums it up. This meme, this is the one that they use on the happy cows. This is the one they use on all the others. Kind of sums it up for you. It's pretty much the same. I interviewed numerous people for the book, people that worked at different animal farming situations. And there was a young man who had worked in slaughterhouses. And he had worked in a slaughterhouse that was a medium-sized animals, so they slaughtered pigs, sheep and lambs and goats. Small scale, so they often had like family farm stamped labels on them and stuff like that on the meat. He worked about 5 minutes down the line, 7 minutes down the line. How it works is they'll take, like, say, a lamb, put her leg, one leg in a shackle upside down, slit her throat. She's going down the conveyor belt, bleeding out, having terrible things done to her body. And he said he worked, 5 minutes down the line, and he said he would have animals, little lambs, that would be coming to him, still breathing, still shuddering, still baaing, still making noise, in agony. So this is a quote from my book. Picture a lamb, a symbol of gentleness and innocence in severe and prolonged agony at slaughter. Most people, if they saw a lamb in pain on the side of a rural road, would feel sadness and empathy and try to gain assistance for this animal in distress. Millions of lambs are suffering behind the dark doors of the slaughterhouse, but are in no less need of assistance. This is another quote from my book. Discomfort with animal suffering leads to the inescapable conclusion that one should not participate in killing. Simply demanding sufficient exposure to outdoors, fresh air, food, shelter, and then being complacent in the termination of their lives is morally inconsistent. So that kind of concludes the ethical section of my talk. I want to switch gears and talk about the environment. I came into veganism as an environmentalist. I was an environmentalist first. I feel that it's incredibly important. I think that all environmental issues are vegan issues. I mean, we have to have a livable planet. The animals have to have a livable planet. But this is one of those areas that it's so frustrating because we could have such a huge impact on the planet with a vegan diet. So we're going to talk about the environmental impact. So just having this many animals, billions of animals alive that we are breeding and killing for meat, dairy, and eggs, is causing 51% of our greenhouse gas emissions. This is from 2 World Bank environmental advisors who were really encouraging a global shift to a plant-based diet. I mean, if we continue on the trajectory we're on, which is mainly focusing on getting to renewables, getting away from fossil fuels and getting to renewable energy, right? This takes time and infrastructure change and government involvement and money. It takes so much more effort than a global shift to a plant-based diet. Boom, overnight, easy. No government involvement, no, money. It just takes the will of the people to do it. So it's really, and the environmental community is waking up to it. They really are. They're starting to. I'm seeing it now. I actually organized the Berkeley Earth Day, and it is one of the only all-vegan official Earth Day events in the U.S. It's changing, but too slowly. We gotta speed things up. Water use, most of our water is going to agricultural sources, what we use personally, like with our showering and all of that, and it's, you hear this, shower less and only water in the morning, all those things. Well, yeah, sure, that helps, but that's a really small drop in the bucket. Most of our water is going to agriculture, and most of that water is for animal agriculture. It's kind of hard to see these, but basically the big piece of the pie is agriculture. This is another water chart where you can see how much water different foods need, and it's kind of hard to read. I don't know if you can see, but apples and potatoes. So we've got plant foods with the lowest amount of water, and then going up to animal foods. They use so much more water. What about local? So local animal products are not entirely local or environmentally sound. A food's carbon footprint, like how local the food is really only 11% of the equation. The production phase is 83% is the production phase, and animal products are heavy on production. Numerous life cycle assessments assess how much greenhouse gas emissions, water use, that kind of thing, from seed to table, or of course with animals from inception to table, are used. And again we find that animal products have a higher impact than local plant foods. This is a study in the Journal of Environmental Science Technology. It found that switching just 2 meals a week from meat and dairy to a vegetable-based diet achieved more greenhouse gas reduction than buying all locally sourced food. And this goes for organic as well. This is a great chart to get a feeling for this. Okay, how far the line goes over is the impact on greenhouse gases. We have 3 diets. We've got veganism at the top, vegetarian in the middle, and the standard American diet, what everybody is generally eating at the bottom, the SAD diet. And the dark green line is commercial farming. The light green line right above it is organic farming. So let's say someone said, you know, I really want to lower my carbon footprint. I want to eat more ecologically. I am going to eat organic only. I'm going to do organic milk and organic dairy and organic eggs, organic meat. Okay, so you go from this dark green line at the bottom to the one right above it. And you have reduced your impact by 8%. Okay, that's something. But let's say someone says, I really want to eat ecologically. I want to eat more green. I'm going to go vegan. And now we're not even talking organic at all. Just going to go vegan. Well, okay, now you jump way up to that little green line at the top, the dark green line at the top, and you have reduced your impact by 87%. Wow, much better. And how about going all the way, doing organic vegan up that little green, tiny green line at the top, the light green line? You have reduced your impact by 94%. Amazing. So really, what I'm getting at here is that animal products have so much impact on the environment. Resource intensive, water intensive. Reducing and eliminating animal products is one of the best things you can do for the environment. Grass-fed is another one that was fascinating to me. I had no idea when I first started researching this, but there are numerous studies that have come out now that actually found that grass-fed beef can produce 50 to 60% more greenhouse gases than commercial beef, and it uses more water. It's amazing. You want to know why? You have to read the book. I don't have time to get into it, but it's all in the book. But it's just really fascinating that people are buying this thinking that it is more ecological, but no, free range. So I use this picture because this can be considered free range. So really, there's no difference at all. There is zero ecological difference in commercial or regular to most free range, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt. And there are some manufacturers that are labeling free range and pasture raised, especially in the pork industry, and giving them a bit more room. So now, whenever we have a true transition to a free range system, the same amount of animals will now use several more acres of land. Right? So remember that the chicken building we just saw? That barn maybe sits on 1/10 of an acre. What if that farmer wanted to give those chickens 5 feet of space each? Well, now we're talking 10 acres of land, right? We just don't have the space on Earth to do this. I mean, we would have to start clearing wild areas and forests and prairies and wetlands to accommodate all these free-ranged animals. It can't be done. We would need closer to 5 planet Earths to free range all the billions of animals that we have in animal agriculture today. Free range, it really can never be more than just a niche market for a few elite buyers. We can't scale it up. We just can't. Organic's good, local can be good, but plant-based is best. Conventional plant foods cause far less environmental damage than organic, local animal foods. So that kind of concludes the environmental section. I am now actually going to talk about fish. I don't feel that fish get talked about enough. They're really the forgotten animal in the food industry, in the animal rights industry, in the vegan conversations. We don't hear about fish enough. It breaks my heart. Somehow fish get put in some other category. I will talk to people. I can't tell you how many people I hear all the time that say, "Oh, I'm vegan, but I eat a little fish." And I'm always like, well, what do you think fish are? But somehow we have put them in this other category, this other. We see them as lesser than. if it be emotional or like their emotional capacity or their capacity to feel pain or whatever it is. We've kind of put them in this lesser category. And I really think that needs to change because the science is showing some amazing things about fish. So I did a real intensive study of fish to give a whole presentation on them. And so this is just a little section of that. I want to start with the question, do fish feel pain? Because this seems to still be a question to some people. And I'll tell a little story about that. When I was a little girl, I grew up in Florida. And actually, fortunately, we didn't go fishing much, even though I grew up in Florida. I wanted to do this talk here, the fish part of it, because I figured also having so much water around, being here in the islands, I'm sure there's a lot of fishing that goes on. Tourists come here just to fish, I'm sure, and to eat the fish. So I feel like it's important here to have this conversation, and anywhere, but especially here. So when I grew up in Florida, we didn't go fishing much, but my dad did take me out fishing one time. And I remember it vividly. It was one of my earliest memories. And we were out in a boat. My dad, I think, caught the first fish, and he brought her into the boat, and she was just, flapping around just in this chaotic, just distress, obvious distress. And I must have also been in distress because my dad kept saying to me, "Oh, it's okay. They don't feel pain like we do. This is all reflexes. They don't feel pain." And I remember, I must have been like 7 years old, and I remember looking at my dad and thinking, "Wow, Dad, I think you're wrong." And I didn't say it, but to me, it was obvious distress. But what's interesting is actually the science now has caught up with what most little 7-year-olds know inherently. Yes, fish do feel pain. It's amazing the science that's come out. Both psychological and behavioral reactions to pain have been really extensively studied now. Fish have neurons that detect potential harm and high temperatures, pressure, that kind of thing. When injured, fish produce the same naturally occurring opioids that mammals do. Like we have opioids that rush into our system when we're injured to try to mask the pain, and fish have that as well, the same thing. Also, when they're injured, their brains just really light up. There's a cascade of electrical activity that rushes to the brain, and it's not only to the hindbrain and brain stem that are responsible for that reflex thing, but also to the regions of the brain that are essential for conscious sensory perception, meaning they are perceiving pain just like we do, just like all other mammals do, just like avians do. Behaviorally, a fish will react by ceasing normal activity, rubbing the affected area, thrashing, rocking from side to side, or laying still on the bottom of the tanks. And when painkillers are given, like morphine, they resume normal activities. It was actually really brutal reading about all the studies and what they did to these fish to find out if they could experience pain or not. And I don't condone that they did these experiments, but because they did, I think it's important to get the information out to gain sympathy for these animals. So I am going to use the studies. So reputable scientific bodies are recognizing this, and actually, so the Smithsonian Institute, I'll read this quote up there with you, "The collective evidence is now robust enough that biologists and veterinarians increasingly accept fish pain as a reality." And then the second quote, so this is the American Veterinary Medical Association's guidelines for euthanasia, and they updated them in 2013. And this is what they said: "Suggestions that fin fish respond to pain merely represent simple reflexes have been refuted." Dad. "The preponderance of accumulated evidence supports the position that fin fish should be accorded the same considerations as terrestrial vertebrates in regards to relief from pain." So, this question has been answered by science. So, what science is doing now is kind of getting into some more interesting studies around fish. And there has been just an amazing amount of science coming out just in the last decade about fish's cognitive abilities, their emotional lives, the complexity of their lives. Science has discovered that fish are sentient and aware, communicative, social, They can be virtuous, they can be mischievous, they can use tools, innovate to solve problems, solve puzzles. They play, they engage in object play, solitary play with each other, and interspecies play as well. They have preferences for who they like to spend time with, who they want to mate with. It's truly amazing. There's a lot going on down there. And the communication is really incredible too, and what they've learned. Fish are not just silent spectators. Because fish don't have ears, it was thought that they didn't make noise or hear. But that's not true at all, actually. Our ears don't detect sound in water, but because of technological advances, underwater sound detecting equipment and stuff, we're now finding that they have just a wide range of acoustic sounds that they make. And we know that their bodies can produce sound and perceive sound. And here's some of the classified sounds now that they know fish make. Hums, whistles, thumps, creaks, grunts, pops, croaks, pulses, drums, knocks, purrs, clicks, moans, chirps, buzzes, growls, and snaps. So there is a lot of communication going on down there. They're individuals with awareness and emotion, memory. There's this myth that fish have a short-term, like they have no memory, no long-term memory, like a goldfish only has a 3-second memory. It's not true. Absolutely not true. They remember. They actually will avoid areas where they've been attacked by a predator, sometimes for years. They get hook shyness. If they've been hooked and put back into the water, then they will, if they know that it's a hook, they will certainly avoid it. Things like this. So it's very easy to discover that they have good memories. They can remember mazes and puzzles even months later. And I want to give a bit of a disclaimer here. I do not feel in any way that any of this that I've been talking about, the gauge of their emotions or their intelligence or whatever, for any animal is a reason to protect them, to exploit them, to give them consideration over another. That's not the reason that I give this information at all. The only thing that we should be looking at when we're thinking about whether we should protect an animal or not harm an animal is, do they feel pain or fear? These are the only things that we should consider. But the reason that I talk about all this is just because it's good to get to know them, to know their lives, to know that they are amazing individual creatures with complex social and emotional lives. So that's the reason that I give this information. They did this experiment on numerous animals, primates as well as fish and other animals. It was a puzzle. So there were two plates, identical plates of food, amounts of food. The food was identical. The only thing that was different is that the two plates were two different colors. One was blue, one was red. Okay, animal comes in to this situation. If you start eating on the blue plate, then the red plate gets taken away and you only get the blue plate of food. If you start eating on the red plate, they keep both plates of food there and you get double the amount of food. Okay, it's a puzzle that they had to figure out, right? Okay. So, interestingly, they did this for capuchin monkeys, orangutans, and chimpanzees, as well as fish. Guess who figured it out faster? The fish. The fish figured it out it took them an average of 45 tries to figure it out, where each of the primates took an average of 100 tries or more. And interestingly, some of the chimpanzees never figured it out at all. So it kind of turns what we think we know on its head, right? It turns what we think we know about animals upside down. They are amazing creatures. This is a great quote about that study from Jonathan Balcombe. I got this out of a book called What a Fish Knows by Jonathan Balcombe, and I very much encourage you to read it. It's fascinating. It does have all of those pain studies in it, though, so just be aware of that. It's a little brutal, that part. This is a great quote. When fishes outperform primates on mental tasks, it's another reminder of how brain size, body size, presence of fur, feathers, or scales, and evolutionary proximity to humans is wobbly criteria for gauging intelligence. So, Very interesting. Fish love touch. Some, not all, they're all individuals, but some love touch and tactile stimulation and interaction with other fish, with humans, in divers. Even, and this is a great moment with this fish is called a humphead wrasse, and they are kind of known for liking to be petted and touched from divers, and this diver they're having a moment. Very sweet. They also have fear and anxiety, and I think this is important to our conversation, which ultimately, of course, is should we kill and eat fish? It has been documented and scientifically confirmed that fish feel fear. They respond to dangerous situations the same as any other animal. They increase their breathing, release distress hormones. They show signs of panic. They may flee or freeze or try to look bigger. And after an incident of fear and anxiety, they will sometimes go without food for a while because they're in distress or won't move much. So this is a quote, again, from Jonathan Balcombe, just kind of wrap up the fish section, but it's a great quote. "A fish is an individual with a personality and relationships. He or she can plan and learn, perceive and innovate, soothe and scheme, experience moments of pleasure, fear, playfulness, pain, and joy. A fish feels and knows." It's really challenging, I think, for humans sometimes to conceptualize and consider other animals as sentient and conscious beings. But again, science has helped us out with that. In 2012, a group of prominent animal scientists, zoologists, biologists came together, and they made what is called the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness. And this included fish and octopus and avians and all mammals. It's stated really very scientifically and complicated, but I'll just put it in layman's terms. Basically, consciousness is almost undoubtedly present in the animal kingdom. Emotion is almost undoubtedly present in the animal kingdom. And consciousness does not require a big brain or backbone or vertebrae. So all animals are conscious. All animals are sentient. They have the right to live free of human-imposed suffering. And I want to just kind of take us back to that concept of speciesism now and realize that we as humans, we hold all the power. I mean, that's really what these isms are about, is a power differentiation. You know, we hold all the power, and it's up to us to make the changes that are necessary to end their suffering, to free them. I encourage you to get my book. I wrote the book, and I wanted to give people good stories, good science, to be able to really respond directly to those, free range and organic and that kind of thing. So I do encourage you to get the book. And I also encourage you, if you're not vegan, I hope you'll go vegan. I really hope today encourages you to take that step to go vegan, that the information inspires you. If you're already vegan, I encourage you to get active. Sounds like there's a lot happening here in Hawaii, so that's wonderful. Find the group that resonates with you and get active. The animals need your energy. They need your help. Do all that you can for them, please. My takeaway message for everyone is, and I heard it in the introduction several times, so I'm glad I'm gonna give you this one, and that is, please stop saying factory farming. And here's why. Factory farming has been a very, very, very powerful term. It has done its job. It has gotten this visceral feeling around animal agriculture that does need to be there into the minds of people. It has gotten people, riled up, and it's definitely done its job. However, things have changed now. Unfortunately, the term factory farming no longer implies veganism. Here's why. I hear people saying, "Oh, well, but my meat's not factory farmed. I get it at Whole Foods," right? My eggs aren't factory farmed. I bought it at the farmer's market. So there's this differentiation now. I've even seen pork producers on their websites say, oh, we don't support factory farming, buy our pork. Okay? This term is no longer necessarily vegan. People are thinking that there's an alternative and that there's something different and there's animal products that are different and not factory farmed. So language is so important, and I encourage you to now, let's retire this term, and we need to talk about all animal agriculture. All animal farming is bad. All animal farming causes suffering. This is the kind of language we really need to start shifting to. Like I said, I go into so much more detail in the book. We've got this factory farming stuff down, right? We know what to say about that, but what do we say when someone says, oh, but my eggs are organic? Be sure that you know all the details about that. I really thank you for having me here today. It's been wonderful. And I will leave you with this quote from my book. It is not our methods of animal agricultural practices that need to change. It is our unwillingness to let go of animal products and animal farming. Thank you. Some questions? Is the Bay Area leading the vegan movement? Was that the question? Like they did in the 60s. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot going on in Berkeley. Absolutely. I would say that. I think more really internationally stuff's happening. Israel, Australia. And that's where there's a lot of energy. So, I think that we need to look to Europe and other areas and really get the energy from them. But, yeah, sure, Berkeley's good. It's interesting because as far as the food goes, the vegan food, this is kind of a side note. It's amazing how different in different areas the vegan food is. Like here, it's still kind of like the vegan food of the 90s, which I love. I'm not dissing this at all, but it's all very healthy and like barbecued tofu sandwich and and salad. But you go to Berkeley and it's like vegan meat and cheese and donuts and milkshakes. It's great. I mean, I love all that too. But it's interesting how different areas have shifted the food differently. But as far as activism, yeah, I think that there's so much more to do, I guess, is what I'll say. Lab-grown meat. Interesting. Good or bad about lab-grown meat? Well, yes, what is lab-grown meat? Thank you. Sometimes called cultured meat, sometimes called clean meat is kind of the new term now. Basically, they take cells from a living animal and they culture it or grow it in a laboratory setting or in a kind of, they're liking it now to like culturing beer. How you grow the cultures of kombucha or beer or something, and create meat that no animal, ever was raised or killed for. But there is controversy. I do have actually a chapter in my book on clean meat. I personally think it's very promising. There's been a lot of information that's come out even since I've written my book. Paul Shapiro wrote a book now on clean meat that is more comprehensive. I think it could be great, but there's so much to it. And he and others are saying that it actually might not be viable as far as the process and getting it production ready and price, bringing the price down. There's just so much involved in making it viable. But what I think it would be great for is cat food, honestly. It's always the dilemma, what do we feed our cats? And, that's what I hope somebody does with it, honestly. is makes cat food so that we can feed our cats ethically. But I don't know. I mean, hopefully that's where they'll go with it. But it's very complicated is really the answer. I think that it could be really there's just a lot of tools in the toolbox, I mean, there's going to be plant-based meats that are getting so much better. I mean, now there's like actual vegan butcher shops. We have one in Berkeley, the Butcher's Son is a deli that they make all their plant-based meats and cheeses in-house, and they're amazing. I mean, they got like roast beef sandwiches that are that thick, and it's really good. So there's plant-based meats, but that's possibly not going to be for everyone. It's possible that large-scale fast food, this clean meat, may be what we need for McDonald's. Possibly. So there's, I think it's a tool that we can use if it can become viable and cost effective. But there's question about that. Have I gotten into any trouble taking pictures was the question. So it's very interesting when you it's either, I always say I'm either like incredibly courageous or incredibly foolish to do what I do, a little bit of both, but I just walk right on and see what happens. And it's always different every time. Sometimes there's just, a farm hand or someone that just works there that doesn't care and whatever, and he'll just talk to me and kind of walk me around, and I'll take pictures, and and we're just talking, and it's no problem. And then I've had other times where farmers have threatened me with violence and tried to block my car from leaving, and wanted to call the police and did call the police, all of that. So I've had that happen too. Yeah, I just kind of do it. And get some good pictures and get the information out there. So it depends, and you just kind of have to be bold and just do it, and hope for the best. I mean, I always try to go in with an attitude of nonviolence and peace and just wanting to have a conversation. So I think that has helped a lot in some situations, but. Farmers are there, especially in our area, they are very aware of the activism that we're doing, and some of them are very hostile to us. So it depends.
Thank you, Hope Bohanec, for your riveting presentation, which should concern all of us as compassionate human beings and as people who would like to protect the environment as well. So thank you for your work, and thank you for your great talk. Really appreciate it. Mahalo to all of you for coming, and have a safe return home. Good night, everyone.